So who am I talking to?
Don't you know your dad?
I do. Dad, how old are you?
79.
79. All right, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I don't know how long maybe it will take you to think of some of them, like the answers and whatnot, but however long it takes, that's fine. I've got plenty of tape here, so. Um, I guess my first question, things that I wanted to ask you, what do you feel is your greatest accomplishment in life?
Surviving.
Surviving. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Well, I worked pretty hard all my life to get what I had to have.
What are some of the things that you did during your life?
Well, when I was about 7, I was weeding onions and peppermint on my hands and knees in the muck in northern Indiana. I worked on the farm, milked cows, baled hay. Went to high school, graduated from manual training high school in 1946 in Peoria, Illinois.
What did you do after that?
Worked in a grocery store for a short time. Then I went to the funeral home and worked in the funeral home. Worked myself into helping with the ambulance and funerals. And off to college in Chicago. In 1955, I opened the first funeral home in Bradley, Illinois. 62, I opened the second one in Monee, Illinois.
How long did you do that?
I think it was 80 when I sold out. I'm not real sure.
And since then, you've worked for Coachman and helping Mom, Flower
Yeah.
Shop, and Walmart.
Yeah, I worked at Walmart, South Bend, Indiana. Actually, Mishawaka. Drove motorhomes for Coachman.
What are you doing now?
Working for Toll Brothers Funeral Home in Sarasota, Bradenton, and Gulfgate. They have 3 funeral homes.
Can't stay away from it, can you?
I don't know anything else.
Not the limo service and the ice company and
Yeah. Been a number of things that I recall growing up, hearing you tell stories about, from the ice company to the floor cleaning business
That's
to
businesses I owned. Yeah, I started businesses from scratch. I had an ice company, had a pet store, limousine service, a floor scrubbing business.
so you've done a lot.
Well, maybe I have. There's one thing I know for sure. Only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what done for Christ will last. all the achievements and accomplishments and failures won't make any difference.
What's the biggest mistake you've ever made?
I don't know that I could say what the biggest one was. There were several in my life that were not too hip. You try to forget your failures and work hard on the accomplishments that will produce the things that you need to support your family.
What do you want people to remember about you?
I've always tried to be honest with people. I always tried to put myself in their shoes and help them. I guess that's why I was somewhat successful in the funeral ambulance business. They were never a number. They were always an individual, somebody's son, somebody's mother.
I remember growing up and going a lot of places when you were driving motorhomes, going to a lot of national parks and monuments and all that. Does anything stick out in your mind about times you spent with me as a kid?
Yeah, I took you with me and to entertain you, I let you stand behind the seat as I drove, and you played like you were a waiter and a cook and a barber. Sometimes you combed my hair and kind of pulled it a little bit, but I just kind of smiled.
Sometimes you shaved him.
Sometimes you wanted to shave my face.
Looking back at your life, what's, one thing that you did that probably no one else has ever done, or very few people? Something that sort of makes you unique.
I'm just a common ordinary guy. I didn't do anything exceptional. A lot of people done more things than I did.
So nothing sticks out, something that you may have done that maybe not a lot of other people have?
I hear you.
So nothing in your mind sticks out as something that not a lot of other people have done that you have?
Well, I was volunteer fire department, and the chief and I went in this building, and it had already been burning for a long time. The basement was full of water, and we fell through the floor into 5 foot of water, and he reached over and turned the electric off, standing in all that water. I thought that was going to be the end of me right there.
I think it was pretty remarkable that a man at 59 years old agreed to adopt a 2-year-old child and raise him.
Well, it was amazing that we had the opportunity, and I've never regretted having Nick. I suppose at times I was probably too tough and too strict, but I guess from the other side of the coin you could say there's a lot of kids that don't know a father of any kind, and if they have a mother, they are not taught anything. The last 22 years I've had a wonderful wife and companion. She's been very supportive. I could have cut a few things out of my life and married her when she was of age and been probably a lot better off.
You would have made me a bigamist because I was already married.
What's probably the best piece of advice that you have for people in general? Something that you've learned.
Well, I've told a lot of kids, even down here, that I've run across, if you don't have two parents, you better hope and pray you have one that cares for you and will kind of direct you. There's no such thing as too much education. If you stumbled and dropped out of high school, go back and get your GED. If you get a chance to go to night school and work days, learn as much as you can. Someday it'll come in handy. I forgot a lot of things that I knew, but quite often they come back to me. And some of my experiences have not been very pleasant. And sometimes I wake up, well, at night. Sometimes I don't wake up. I just feel like I'm in that situation, which was probably pretty dangerous.
You've probably seen a lot of danger in your lifetime, yeah?
Yeah. I remember one time I was driving the ambulance down south of Kankakee, and it was where the wind was across the highway, a big patch of ice, and there was an accident there. State trooper standing out in the middle of the road, and it was dry until you got to this certain area. I put my brakes on, and I couldn't stop. The state trooper's out in the middle of the road waving me down. And I turned the siren back on just a little bit, and I slid right past him. He stepped out of the way down the road and tried to turn around and got stuck in the middle of the divided highway. Boris Road pulled me out of there and got back up to the accident scene, and the state trooper said, "That's good driving." He said, "Now you're headed toward the hospital." There was 5 other ambulances came out there. They were all closer than we were, but on the way to the hospital at the south side of Kankakee, I had a left front tire go flat. I had a little baby on my lap. I stopped. People from somewhere came and changed the tire, asked me where the spare was. It was behind the seat. When I got to the hospital, came out, there was my flat tire. None of the other ambulances even passed me. They were down there still trying to get loaded up and come back. That was kind of a nice thing to have happen. I don't know who changed the tires. Another time I was coming into Kankakee on the north side up by Marty's Steakhouse, and it had rained and I was traveling pretty fast. And I got on top of the water and I couldn't steer the car. I said, "Lord, you're going to have to help me out of this situation." all the cars coming toward me got clear off the road, and I had 4 lanes to drive on. I looked down, I was doing rather fast. People behind me were screaming and yelling. They thought they were dying, and I thought we were all going to die. The car settled down and I could turn the wheel and get back on my side of the road. And Harry and I left on a call one night, and I come down the middle of Broadway and Bradley, it's a T down there, and came down through the subway underneath the railroad, and the accelerator stuck wide open. And I must have been doing 50 or 60. Fortunately, it was a stick shift, so I got the clutch down and made a turn and put it right up against the curb, and it went up on 2 wheels and come back down. I had turned the key off to get it started so it wouldn't run. I looked over at Harry and said, "You all right?" He said, "Yeah, I think so." I pulled the accelerator up, started it, went on to the accident scene and picked up the man, and I knew there was something wrong with the car, so I didn't drive very fast. Next morning I took it down to Brazos gas station, and they checked the right rear wheel, and the rim was bent, but the axle wasn't. But that could have been a pretty bad scene. Then there was a place accident at North Street. No, Armour Road and Route 50. Car upside down, gasoline running out of it. State trooper was over there at the scene when I arrived. And I seen this gas all over the highway, and I parked the ambulance where I thought it would stay out of the gas. Some man got out of a vehicle and started to cross through this gas to help, and he put a cigarette in his mouth, and I decked him. I don't know why, but I guess it saved our lives. State
Thing to
trooper,
do at the time.
state trooper put him in the squad car and told him to stay there. Asked me what was wrong. I said, "We want to smoke." And he said, "Oh no." Good. There was another time on 45. I got up there before anybody else did, and I couldn't get the man out, and he was screaming. Car was on fire. Finally help came, but it was too late. He quit screaming. He was still behind the wheel.
A lot of tough times, huh? A lot of tough times.
I wish I could forget him.
What about the night that we drove from Elkhart to Louisville?
Well,
11:15 till 5 o'clock in the morning.
that was a kind of a fast trip. That's when you got in your accident.
I don't think he said 3 words the whole night. Hands on the steering wheel like this.
I don't know how fast we ran, but I know we were running hard. When we got to the hospital, I didn't recognize you. Your lips were swollen clear up over your nose.
Remember living in Robinson in that house that Pulliam let us have? When Nick was a little boy? We got the little toddler swing from a yard sale, and you hung it up in the garage door, and you'd take him out and swing him after work when you'd come home.
Kinda do, yeah.
Talk to me about your parents a little bit. You told me the other night about your dad. Tell me about your mom.
Mom was always home. She was always checking on us kids to be sure we had what we needed. She was a hard-working mom, even to the times that she would sit down and help us with our homework. She was born in Kentucky.
What about when she put her hat on?
When we were bad, where she would go in and sit in front of her mirror at her dresser, and us three kids would get around her and say, "What's the matter, Mom?" She said, "Well, I'm gonna leave because you won't do what I ask." And she'd try her hot song, and where are you going, Mom? I'm going out in the garden and eat worms and die. You don't need me anymore. When you're 3 to 5 years old, that makes quite a impression on you.
Sounds like it.
Remember one time she said, "Do you want me to tell your dad?" And I'd rather she would have called the President of the United States than tell Dad, because he was real bad. Usually, though, she done all the correcting.
She's a pretty fiery lady, huh? Pretty fiery.
Gradually steaming up. She never really lost it. But in Mill Creek, in the evenings, we used to play hide the button. Everybody leaves a room except one person. You put a button someplace, hopefully in sight. You come back and you couldn't touch the button, but you could say, "I spy," which gave you the chance to hide it next time. But everybody else had to take turns trying to find it. If it was hard to find, why, the one that hid it would say, "You're getting warmer, you're getting hotter." That was, you're getting closer.
Mm-hmm.
She always had popcorn or cracklings for a treat. There was no such thing as going to the ice cream store, or she'd wrap a blanket underneath her chin and around the pot-bellied stove and then wad it up and bring it to the bed and wrap my brother and my legs and feet around it to put us to sleep.
Tell me about the teacup. Your mom and the teacup? The company would come over?
Oh, she used to say, "Come on and have supper with us." I got plenty more downstairs than a teacup. We didn't even have a basement. I don't know where she meant was downstairs. Had a basement outside and it was like a cave.
Like a cellar.
Dad did a candy man, that's all I know his name was. And one time we went to visit him and he had these light and dark caramels and they got moisture in them and the papers stuck. And he gave us 3 cases of those. Us kids were told not to go down in the outside cave to get them, but somehow we just kind of got a few at a time, and first thing you know, 3 cases of them were gone. We had this kid that he came out with the city and he was so smart. Actually, he was a smart aleck. So we decided we would play Run Man Run. So we had a roll of wire, about number 9 wire, and we stretched it across between the woodshed and the house. And we'd run around the yard and get him to chase us. We came to the wire, we'd jump over it. Of course, he didn't know the wire was there, and he kind of skidded in the cinders, and he went inside, and we had time to get the wire rolled up out of the way, so we didn't get in any trouble about that.
So you're a pretty big prankster, huh?
Well, he was a city dude, and he was a little bit better than we were. And then across the street we had an acreage like we got back here. We used to make our own kites out of paper, newspaper, and balsa wood. And then we wanted to fly them at night, so we'd put a little 1-cell flashlight on the tail so we could tell where our kite was. And the kite got so big that some of them were 6 foot tall,
Really?
and they had to have a pretty good sized cord to hold them, and sometimes you couldn't hold them. The string would break and your kite would go out of sight with your flashlight, and it was time to go home then.
Used to play a lot of pranks in the funeral home, yeah?
Well, we had a few. Red Cross asked me one time to fix up a dummy so we could put her on the wagon, take her down Broadway, and mess her up so she looked bad. And then put a sign on there, if you haven't been trained as a first aid attendant, what could you do for this person if you came upon them? Stimulating the people that would go and learn first aid. I got one at the ladies' dress shop. They didn't use it anymore. And I went to the butcher shop and got a bone out of the cow's leg and punched a hole in her leg with the hammer and put the broken bone in there, and I put wax and cosmetics around it, and looked pretty good, or pretty bad. And then I called Garrett Ozinga, who drove the hearse and worked for the police department, asking to come over and come in the back way, and he did, and I had the lights turned down, and I had her partially covered, and he said, "Who is it?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, "I have no idea, no identification." And I said, "There in the back of the garage is where the cinders is where I found her." It was a cinder alley. And I had taken white gloves and put on her and rubbed them in the cinders with the, it really did look pretty good. And of course she had went like this and had cinders down the side of her face. And he kept getting a little closer. He said, "Well, who is she?" I said, "Well, I probably should have called the coroner's office before I took her out of the alley, because he said, "Well, should we go out and look at the scene?" And I said, "There's nothing there. Nothing there." So I turned the lights up a little bit louder, and he was a church-going man, but I think he forgot that for a little bit, and he started talking in unknown tongues and went out the back door. He didn't talk to me for a little while. Then later on he thought that was kind of funny. Then we had Randy, who was on the police department. Randy was maybe a little feminine, and the chief of police and I were pretty good friends. In fact, I buried his wife, Bill Barwigan. Bill Barwigan was somewhat relation to the Hoekstras out there at St. Ann area. They raised potatoes and so on. We had a flat roof on the funeral home, and Harry had an old 38 Ford Chevy, two-door, and we run that up against a tree across the way and put a dummy in the seat and opened the door and let the dummy kind of hang out. And Barwigan got on the radio, the walkie-talkie, and told Randy that he needed to get over by the funeral home and examine that accident. There seems to be something over there. There were at least 5 of us up on the roof of the funeral home across the street. And of course Randy was a little squeamish from his feminine side, and he come over with his lights on, and he got out and he looked and he got his flashlight and got back on the radio, and he said, "Well, I think she's dead." And Barwigan got on the radio, and of course he had echoed across to his radio, and he had some words to say, and he left. But, probably one of the dumbest things we ever did, when we were just a little bitty kid, you know, like 10, 12 years old, Halloween, we weren't allowed to do much, but we had a road that went right by our house in Mill Creek there that had a car about every 15, 20 minutes. We tied a lady's purse to a double string, and we put that purse in the middle, and when they'd back up, we'd pull the purse out of the way, because we'd hide out in the ditches, and they couldn't see the string, and they thought they were seeing something that they didn't see. And then they'd go on, we'd put the purse back out, and then maybe we'd drag it the other way. We do that for a couple hours. It was good entertainment, for us anyway.
Did you pull a prank on the laundry guy at the funeral home?
Oh, I don't think I should talk about that.
I think you should.
He brought our laundry every day, every week, whatever it was. And take the dirty sheets and bring clean ones, bring them downstairs into the basement. Well, this one time, our boss was at work, and I thought, well, let's have a little fun. So I took some, what we call a posting needle, which is about that long and is an S curve. Put some good heavy wax cord through it and tied the laundry bag to the hinge on the cupboard and set it there. You couldn't tell it was tied. Now the door to the embalming room would go, you push it open, but it would come back closed. It was just slowly. And of course the light was a little round toggle switch, and it flickered and finally came on. In the meantime, I thought, well, why don't I just lay underneath this hanging clothes that were on the rack there, which were our change of clothes, our raincoats, whatever, and I lay on the stretcher and take a little nap. Well, my buddy Francis Hammett was outside, and he said, he's coming, and he spoke to him just like nothing, and the guy comes in down the ramp and flips that light on, opens the door and grabs the laundry, and I sat up and I said, hello there. Well, in the meantime, the door came partly shut, hit him right in the forehead. I mean, blood went everywhere. And I thought, boy, we're in trouble. So the first thing, I didn't care about him. I figured he was a big boy. But I got rid of that string that I had put on there, so I took the laundry out and give it to him. Well, he smoked a pipe, and he always had about 10 pipes. And I know he didn't want to come in when he would sit out there and clean the pipe and pack one and smoke it. He just didn't like that stop. After that, we took the laundry out to him quite often in hopes that he would never see the boss, because that was pretty risky.
How old were you when that happened? How old were you at that time?
I was,
Old enough to know better.
yeah, I was probably about 20.
Yeah.
It was good. For a pastime, we used to go on the two-wheel oxygen cart and let each other go down the driveway. You know, you go so far with a two-wheel cart,
Right.
and when you couldn't run any faster, you could just drop it. Of course, you'd hang on to the cart and take a pretty good bounce, but always watch for that black 98 Oldsmobile. If that was coming, we scattered like everything.
I'm gonna change gears a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about your family. Tell me about Denise. Tell me about Denise.
Well, my first marriage, I had a baby 13 months old when we opened the funeral home. Her name was Denise. My mom babysat while my wife worked at General Foods in Kankakee, Illinois. And Dad was the minister, but he kind of hung around the funeral home. If I got a call, well, he'd go with me. And one day, Denise took a tumble down all those steps from upstairs to down. They were carpeted. It didn't hurt her, but Mom felt real bad about it. But she watched the phones. It was pretty slow. I drove a school bus while I was trying to get the funeral home to go. And bombed down the basement with the plumbing against your head. Carried the bodies down an outside stairway and back up, outside and inside, and put them in a casket. Joe Hoffman from Peoria would bring 4 caskets in a pickup truck with a cap on it. He would wait until the family made a selection, bring 1 cloth and 1 medium metal and 1 little better one, then maybe 1 little bit better. and I would sell one of those, and then I'd have a place to store them because I only had 5 rooms, and they were only about 10 by 10. But as I got paid for one funeral, he let me buy 2 caskets. Paid for the one I buried and one I was going to have next time. And God was good to us, and we served him. And it was only about a year, maybe a year and a half, I put a 40 by 30 addition on. And at that time, part of it was a 3-stall garage. And then later, I built a 5-stall garage. You could drive straight through with electric doors on each end. And then underneath the old garage, we raised the floor up, made a casket room, and then stored caskets underneath the floor. So I didn't have to get them so often. But I wish I had those records in the ones that we
Well,
buried.
you got off the track. You were talking about Denise.
Well, Denise grew up there, and
She helped you a lot when she was growing up, didn't she?
yeah, she probably when she was just first or second grade of school, she heard her mother and I talking about money being kind of tight, and she went around the block and collected about 30 pennies from the neighbors, which was quite embarrassing. We weren't really that tight that we had to get the neighbors to donate pennies. But,
What about the cheese story?
well, Grandma would take her to the store and try to keep her pacified, and she would be cranky because she was hungry, and a lot of times at the meat department they had some cheese sliced up, and Grandma knew that, so she'd go back and they had them on toothpicks, and she'd give her one little bite of cheese. And of course, one didn't do it as they walked through the store. Why, she would just keep hollering, "Mo cheese, mo cheese, mo cheese." And she went to high school there, and of course her brother David came along. I believe it was 5 years later. And he went to school there in Mill Creek, in Kankakee. I ran for school board one time, missed it by about 3 votes out of 100. And after the election was over and counted, why, one of the guys who was on the board come to me. He said, if I would have known you wanted to be on the board, I'd have put you on my ticket. And then when they voted for these 3, well, you'd automatically went in. But the reason I went on the board, or tried to be on the board, is because I thought I could give my kids, as well as the kids of that day, a better education. But I found out that a couple of the guys have been on for 30 years, and the main thing was they got to go to the school board United States meeting in Las Vegas or whatever.
Convention?
Convention, and the school board paid for it and all. I wasn't really interested in that.
What do you think of your kids? What do you think of your kids?
What do I think of my kids? Well, in high school, Nick came to me and said that he wanted to go to the Navy.
David.
David did. And after he was, I guess, a year or so later, he went down to recruiting and came to me, and he said it was the same recruiter that had been to high school. And he asked me what I thought about him going to the Navy as soon as he was out of high school, and I said, well, they want men in high school, or in the Navy. I don't know if you're one or not. So he went to Great Lakes, and I took him up there and told him to call me anytime that he could get to a phone, because they had a bank of phones, but they had 3,000 or 4,000 guys waiting to call their relatives, girlfriends, whatever. And he called me to collect a few times. Of course, it was only a 6 week course, I think. And I went up to get him, and he graduated, and I brought him home for whatever time he had before he had to go away. And said to him he made his last collect call. I wasn't taking any more collect calls. He was a man now. And I never did, except one in Alaska. And the first thing he said was, the reason I'm calling you collect is they won't take my telephone card here. I just want you to know I was okay and so on. I told him I'd take a collect call from the sheriff, from a hospital or a coroner, or a funeral director. In other words, grow up. You're on your own. And he spent all of his time in California, in the Navy, in San Diego. He was a barber, and he kept the pop machines filled. He had a chance to go to college right there in the Navy and turned his head on more education. Denise was always friendly, helpful. I had to almost threaten David to go on an ambulance call with me, even though it was just a nursing home call, no blood, no pain, just transfer. But Denise was ready to go. She didn't care what it was. Well, as soon as she was old enough to be lifting and so forth. She could have made a good funeral director, but
One of these days, you're not going to be around anymore. What do you want them to know when you're gone?
well, when I was 7 years of age, I gave my heart to Jesus, and it was at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. Mom took us to a missionary meeting, and they talked about worshiping cows in India, and I started crying, and she said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I'll tell you later." And finally we got home, went to the bedroom, and she said, "What is wrong with you?" I said, "Well, I don't want to serve a cow for my salvation." And I accepted Christ on the third floor of 311 North LaSalle Street in an apartment. And I haven't always done what God would want me to do, but He's always forgiven me. And this past week I read at least 6 chapters in Psalms, and I do a lot of praying. Sometimes I can't sleep, so I pray for people that I know that need Christ as their Savior. Some know God, but they maybe need a little guidance. So at my funeral, don't worry about me. I know where I'm going. And if it wasn't for leaving my wife behind and some of the close relatives that I have, I'm ready to go right now. No regrets. I pray that if there is something, that there's still something I should do, that I will be alerted to do what I can. We had a man out here tonight, and Ann called me and said he wanted to get $8 because he had a little toolbox with some things in it that wasn't worth anything. And so I went out there and took my chair and sat down, and he had a bicycle, and I witnessed to him about Jesus. I'm going to turn around and give him $10, and who knows, maybe that was one of my testing points. There isn't anybody at Coachman at Toll Brothers that don't know that I'm different. They came in the other day, and I said, I took that leather case of yours and put it over there because we may need the table.
Jeff said that.
Yeah, Jeff Toll. I said, that's not a leather case, that's my Bible. I read it all the time. There's a lot of good things in there for people. And I'm reading Revelation. I'm reading Daniel of things that are going to come. And when Jesus comes, if you're not ready to go with him, it's going to be a terrible mess.
Honey, do you have something you could say to Robbie?
Well, I try to witness to Ann's son, Robbie. Pray for him all the time. And today, one of the attorneys, the black man, woman had her son there, and he's 20 years old, and she said he was a homeschooled student and done real good in school, and when he got to be 16, why, he wanted to go to public school, so she let him. Then he started drugging and drinking, stealing, and ended up being arrested 2 or 3 times. And I didn't know it, but this judge said that he had been one of those wandering kids.
You're talking about on TV?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What is that man's name?
Joe Brown, honey.
No, the other one. But anyway, he said that he got tired of doing the wrong thing and getting in trouble with the law. And he said something very important. He said, you know, you can have good parents. They can teach you, try to teach you. You can have a place in your heart for God. And you can know right from wrong. But until you decide that you're doing the wrong thing and it's not helping you, nobody can help you except pray for you. That's what he said today.
And I wanted you to tell Robbie that.
No, you can't get to Robbie. He won't talk to you.
He might see this. He might see this someday.
Well, if Robbie sees it, only he can change his life.
What in the world?
The thing that people don't realize, that serving the devil, and it don't make any difference whether you wholeheartedly serve the devil or you just play games with yourself. Satan is always seeking who he will devour. And, you know, if you try living for God and you just think that, oh, I can't do it, you're right. You can't do it on your own. But the devil will always take you back. The devil will say things to you like, you know, come on, this is what the in crowd is doing. Come on, this won't hurt you. But on the other hand, he's building bridges against what you know is right, and making you feel like it's not going to hurt you. I don't know of anybody that's ever been in trouble with the law that went out and just done something really bad the very first time. So there's probably a few, but they start out with little things. Little habits become great habits. You know, it's just possibly like overeating. When people overeat and get terribly heavy, they're just causing problems all through their body. It don't happen overnight. Someone was on television the other day, weighed 600 pounds. Couldn't get out of his bedroom. You know, they finally removed a window or something and got him out. And got him to the hospital and tried to get him on treatment. And they'd lost quite a bit of weight, but sin just eats on you gradually. I talked to a lady today down at Toll's. She's been friendly. Gino's mother, and she'd been taking cancer treatment. She's wearing the head covering because she has no hair. I had a chance to witness to her, just 2 or 3 sentences. And I said, you know, they do wonderful things today in a way of helping people's health back. And I explained about your terrible accident a little bit. But I guess one other thing that I would like to have people know is little is much when God is in it. You know, he can take the loaves of bread and the fishes and feed thousands of people. He can take the widow's mite, her little bit of money that she had, and put to a good cause and multiply it.
We got about a minute left on this tape.
You don't know really who's watching your life. You know, there are a lot of people that just look at other people and say, well, I don't know why they do this, or I don't know what's different about them. Well, I'd like to have people know that I'm not perfect, but I'm born again. And the blood of Jesus Christ has forgiven my sins, past, present, and future. Thank you.
Is that it?